Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Master Plan Lecture Series. This is lecture number 7 on the Master Plan textbook, and this one is on the central path. Now, the central path is pretty big section, but I want to kind of give a bigger perspective of what the central path is and why it's important. Um, why the central path changes how you learn jujitsu. The big idea is the central path is not just a strategy for fighting, it's a strategy for learning. Its greatest value may be that it dramatically reduces the amount of time students spend trying to figure jujitsu out for themselves. So each position has a central path. It's a strategy, it's a foundation based on mechanics, based on probability of victory, and I think that that is incredibly important. And I've taken a lot of my life and I've put a lot of repetitions in to try and figure out what works best from each position. I think that when you first start learning a move and you go ahead and try a move and you fail, you can take that failure in a few different ways. You can say, well, the move doesn't work. I tried it, didn't work. It was too hard to do. Maybe if I land in the position or the person gives it to me, I'll do that particular move. But what if that move is an 80-20 move? And what I mean by that is 80 out of 100, you're going to win. But that doesn't mean that you're going to win 80 at the beginning. When you're learning how to do something, you might lose 10 in a row, 15 in a row, and then win the rest. So once you understand that these things that I'm telling you, they're like universal truths, essentially, right? It's hard to argue with some of the points I make because they make a lot of sense. So I've kind of accepted that. I've kind of, in a lot of ways, understand the limitations of this world and the positions themselves. So I put myself in these positions and I tried it over and over and over and over and over, just rep after rep, where people would become bored from particular positions. I would continue to put myself in those positions over and over and over. And the central path is essentially the result of me putting myself in these positions. Now, it's important to recognize that even though there is a central path, you could be in a horrible position. And when you're trying to think your way out of it, the first step that you work on getting out might be a 20-80 battle. So if you're so deep in the hole, you can still get caught. But again, that doesn't mean that that's not the correct thing to at least attempt. And I think that putting a focus on the strategy and putting a focus on particular moves, giving the moves a hierarchy and importance is incredibly valuable. Because why are moves important? Because they work, because they're consistent, because they're efficient, because you can pull them off more often than not. So when you're work all the time, which one of those moves work very little? And whether it's passing the guard, passing strategies, I tried everything. I literally tried everything over and over and over until I figured out the consistencies, where the battles can be lost, and um, again, giving a high probability of success. Now, each position has its own central path, but in reality, if you look at chest to back positions, it's the same basic strategy. It's just, do you have the hooks or do you not have the hooks, right? When you're dealing with chest to chest positions, are you bypassing the legs? Are you isolating the arms from side mount? Are you isolating the arms from mount? I think that the simplicity and the strategies from each position are incredibly valuable. Not only is the strategy simple, but it's incredibly effective. So rather than trying to piece together different positions, different moves from different positions, different steps of different moves from different positions, where things become very complicated, if you understand what the central path is in each position, it will greatly focus your energy, and it'll kind of, the things that don't work will kind of dissipate away. At the very least, we're working from a place of stability, fundamental stability, where you can calm down, where things can slow down, and where you can make better decisions, right? Now, the opening question here: why have a central path at all? Why not just learn a lot of good techniques? That is really the question that needs to be answered. Because if you already have techniques, why do you need a path? I think when you're thinking in terms of a path, it allows you to think ahead. You can kind of see what's coming. When I started riding a bike, it made me a better driver because it forced me to have to look ahead, because you don't want to crash, because you don't want to fall down. So you end up looking further ahead of you. So you end up planning things much further ahead. You start seeing a broader perspective. And I did the same thing with jujitsu. I give you guys a little bit of a buffer in the direction that you're going, based on, again, the simplicity of the framework: chest to chest, chest to back, and supplemental facing direction, these kinds of things. The mindset, the JVOS mindset, which helps you make reasonable decisions consistently. So this path gives you uh, time to process, time to witness things. It gives you a calming, brings you to a state of presence. Why is jujitsu so difficult to learn? Is jujitsu actually too complicated, or have we made it complicated by the way we teach it? Again, I think that this is a fairly obvious um, question for me. I think that in the beginning of the master plan, I kind of lay out the foundations of the framework in which people teach jujitsu, and the amount of emphasis that it puts on the student. The student doesn't have a clue on what moves work and what moves don't. So if you start randomly learning a bunch of moves, in particular arm locks, the longer I kind of have been doing this central path idea, the less I fall to the extremities, right? Like the extremities, the arms and the legs. If I can beat you in the chest to chest and chest to back scenario, I don't need to go to the arm lock. So I see a lot of beginners being taught arm locks, and I go, wow, like, does that even make sense to teach a beginner an arm lock? Number one, in a street fight, could you arm lock somebody? Sure, but you can also break their arm and the guy keeps fighting you. You slip the arm on, now you're on the bottom, the fight continues. They'll bite your leg. The person bites your leg. You tend to let go of the arm lock. So there's limitations with arm locks that, would I use them in a real fight? I'm not talking just grappling. Okay, great, whatever. But when you attack an arm lock, your entire control mechanism is based on the legs, which take more energy, which it's less economical in so many ways, as opposed to your chest to back connection or your chest to chest connection, where you're driving pressure downward. Now, obviously, the guard's a different scenario, but I'm thinking just central path. I'm on top. I'm controlling the person that's underneath. So I think having a path just makes things a lot easier, rather than you having to learn move, learn move, learn move, learn move from everywhere, learn all these moves, and then figure out as a beginner how to make it all work. I did it that way. It took me forever, and I really hyper focused on my game. I wrote everything down, got everything out on the table, and then I'm like, well, what really works? I like this, I like this, I like this, I like this. But I mean, man, I've dedicated my whole life to doing this. So I mean, who has time for that? Who has that kind of time? So learning the central path, it saves you so much time. I tell my students all the time, you can do it your way. You can do it my way. Listen, this is an 80-20. This is a good system. This is a good way to do it. It's consistent. Try it this way. Even if you fail 20 times in a row, you'll eventually start winning. Because when you start to see the failures, you start to recognize where the holes in the technique is, or when the holes of what you're doing is, and we can plug those holes because you're an intelligent being that can correct and make and change your behavior to better your outcomes. I think that even even academies that have curriculum, I've thought about this pretty deeply as well. Even academies that have curriculum, what is the end result? What is the end result? Are you just kind of going through a curriculum and learning all these moves and you can show me all these moves? Or is it systemized? Does it work? Is it effective? Does it make sense? How does everything blend together? How does the whole course, how does the whole curriculum work together? When I started the master plan, I started with my desired results first. I said, okay, what do I want out of the system? What do I want the students to learn from this system? And then that's when I came up with it. Maximum effectiveness, maximum efficiency, punch defense mindset throughout, highly effective. Um, I started with that first, and that's not just some sort of a generic list, because maximum efficiency comes down to every decision you make is as efficient as possible. Every frame is as efficient as possible. Every movement is as efficient as possible. So you start to change the way you think about every scenario, every situation. Why does it take so long to get good the other way? I think because you have to try and see what works. If the coach doesn't tell you, if the professor doesn't tell you this is an 80-20, this one's a 20-80, they just teach them to you equally. Like, how do you know? How do you know unless you tried a bunch of and fail a bunch of times, right? So doing things the right way the first time, it saves you a lot of times and a lot of problems. So question two, what happens when you have too many choices? Imagine you're in side mount and you know 20 attacks. Is that automatically better than knowing three? Not necessarily, because your brain has 20 possibilities to process. Which one do I choose? When do I choose it? What reaction am I waiting for? What if it fails? That creates hesitation. The central path reduces the choices. Instead of asking what could I do, you ask what comes next. That's a completely different mental processing. Imagine a computer with folders and videos in folders. And imagine each video is a technique. This is the way I laid out the videos that I'm putting online, right? You have to go to the file, go to the drive, then you go to the position, then you choose top or bottom, then you figure out what you want to do. So you're just digging into folders and folders and folders and folders. When you're sparring, that's the way your brain is going to access the information. You're going to think, I'm here inside now. How did that move go? Was it from here? What was the configuration? Like, you start to kind of ask all these questions. And while you're asking these questions, time is going. They can react, they can shift, they can adjust, they can attack, they can back out. The same time is being shared between the two combatants. So if you have somebody that doesn't have to have that extra processing time because of the simplicity in which they look at the world, because they understand that they have the path and they understand where the path is going and they understand how to lead the path, rather than have somebody that has to constantly think, how was that move? Where was my foot? Where was my hand? How was that grip? You have so many options. I talk about this all the time with food. When you go to a grocery store, you think you have all these options, aisle after aisle after aisle of choice after choice after choice. But if you understand how to read the ingredients, you'll quickly realize that you don't have as many choices as you think, that the vast majority of those things you shouldn't put in your body. And then there's very few parts that you do. But I remember when I was doing Gerson and I would look at the aisles, I go, wow, I couldn't have anything. I couldn't have anything on the shelves. Everything had to be, organic, nothing processed, very, very strict diet. And I would walk into the store. I go, people think they have all these options when they really don't. And jujitsu is the same way. You have all of these moves, all of these possibilities, all of these techniques. And on top of that, the next layer, the steps to all of those things, it becomes overwhelmingly complex. So the amount of options sometimes hold you back. Sometimes it's better to have less and be very, very good at it than to have a million things that you can't do any of them. And that's kind of the central philosophy behind the master plan and the central path itself, is like, hey, let's just get really, really good at controlling from these basic positions. Let's get really, really good at these specific battles. Because if I can narrow down the battles that are truly important, the crucial battles that are truly important for advancement, and I can get you really, really good at those, every time you land in those positions, you start to win them more and more and more, because you're fine-tuned to fighting these specific battles. So the options are sometimes not in your benefit. Question 3, why does the central path speed up learning? I think it speeds up learning because of the lack of options. And I'm not saying that you can't have options later, but what I'm saying is, hey, let's learn these central paths first. And this happens often with students that have trained with other people and they come in and they're kind of having difficulty with the style in which we roll. And then they start catching on. They're here, 6, 7 months, whatever. And then they start to figure it out and they start to catch on. And now all of a sudden, this individual that had all these moves it wasn't helping them early on. Now they have an understanding of how everything works and they have all of these moves. So it's reverse. It works in reverse, right? Those moves will make a lot more sense when you have the structure that the master plan provides. So we're building through the central path, and when you have all the options, then the options become a lot more reasonable. They start to make a lot more sense, and and you start to pick and choose the best times to have those options. And you have the opportunity to do those options because the central path is so effective. So reverse engineer, that's what I meant. You can reverse engineer. So if you can, even if you have all the moves, if you learn the central paths and you learn what we're doing here, even second, you'll be able to reverse engineer all those moves into your game. And then you'll start to ask yourself, why am I doing this one? I don't need to do this one. But I do like this one. I do like that one. And you can pick and choose the ones out of the techniques that you have that work the best. And that would be your second layer of information. So you have the base layer of attack, which is the central path. And now you are springing secondary and supplemental attacks off of the central path. This is where the variation comes in. You have the trunk, you have the branches, and then you have the leaves. So the trunk is the stuff that works all the time, the central path. The branches are the things that are secondary and supplemental. And then you have the leaves, which are everything else beyond that point. So because we're not hyper focusing on the leaves and we're hyper focusing on the trunk and on the branches, everything starts to make sense. The longer you're around this way of thinking, the more I think it makes sense. The strategy portion is already built into the master plan. So the positions already have a strategical direction that we like to follow and a path that we like to lead the opponents in. The central path does not teach you jujitsu. It saves you the years normally spent organizing jujitsu. The information that I'm teaching you is a consolidation of information over a lifetime of experience. I competed at a high level. I've been doing this for, I've been grappling for 30 years, over 30 years now. So that organization, that consolidation took a lot of time. When I first wrote the books in 2011, it was all of the information out there, all the leaves. And then we had to think to ourselves, how are we going to translate and simplify this information? And that was consolidating and then coming up with individual paths for each individual position. This is an unbelievable time saving device. So when I started to teach this system, I had to think to myself, I need to be anybody who comes in the door as an academy owner has to be able to slot in to the system and then easily be able to adapt and acclimate to the rhythm of the class and the mentality behind the system. So that's one of the reasons I do it the way I do, because even if you don't have tons of instructors, if you partner up somebody new with somebody who's been around, that's helpful. Again, it would it expedites the process when you have multiple people that are kind of following the same system. Question number 4, why does the central path work? Because it is based on probability. We're not choosing techniques because they're interesting. We're not choosing them because they're flashy. We're choosing actions because they succeed more often than they fail. The central path asks, what is the highest probability decision I can make from this position in this time as well? Not just in the position, but in this moment. Then, what is the next highest probability decision? Then the next. One good decision leads to another. That's how probability begins compounding. And I get into this in the textbook in the JVOS section where I talk about decisions by being binary choices. You turn, you don't turn, you go, you grab, you don't grab, you grab here, you don't grab here. So when you start to make the right choice, the right decision over and over, it starts to compound and it increases your level of control so that you don't feel like you're chasing the person or reacting to the person. You're just going point to point, control, 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 without having to make big jumps. I think a lot of people get a little bit greedy and they try to make big jumps. And in those jumps is what creates the looseness or the space necessary for the opponent to move, to counter, to get them to start chasing you, or to force you to start chasing them. Is what I meant. The choices that I'm choosing are high probability choices. These things are not debatable. I don't think they're debatable. A lot of these decisions that I make are not debatable. And I talk to tell my students this. You think you have all these choices. You don't. You don't have all these choices. That's why if I roll with high level people that try a bunch of stuff, the roll itself, when I roll with a white belt or I roll with a really, really good guy, the roll itself looks very consistent because of the battles I choose to fight. So it doesn't matter if you're a high level black belt or world champion or whatever, it doesn't matter, or a blue belt or a purple belt or a white belt, it doesn't really matter because the battles I am choosing to fight and the way I'm choosing to fight them gives everybody the same problems. And if you're not used to dealing with this kind of problem, it takes you a second to process what's happening. And then you're going to have to make up that time that you were spending processing in other ways, going harder, going faster, using more strength, trying to bully your way out. So again, those are those economical decisions that can cost you. Because remember, you're a little character, and we're just the energy bar is just dropping over and over and over. So everything is an energy exchange. That's victory to me is winning the energy exchanges. It's not just simply submission. Would you rather know 10 techniques that work occasionally or have a sequence of 3 or 4 actions that can reliably reproduce that can be reliably reproduced under pressure? This is the philosophy behind the central path. I don't like surprises. I don't like probability of losing. Um, I like winning every single second of every single round. I know it's not possible, but at the very least, I want to control the energy and control the tension throughout my entire rolling sequence. And what I've come to recognize with good confidence, I can say this, is that anytime I deviate away from the central path, just life gets harder. Things just become a lot harder. When I don't grab things in the way that the central path says to do it, when I don't do things and I don't follow the strategy of the central path, I just feel like I use up a lot more energy. It's more energy intensive, it's labor intensive. It makes me more tired. So it's almost like my default behavior is laziness, lack of lack of movement. But if we're sparring and I don't have to move much to make you very tired, the question is, why do I want to move more to make myself more tired when I don't need to? Again, the choices are very few. There are less choices than you really think. So I like things that work often. I don't like the techniques that don't work all the time. I don't like the grips that don't work all the time. I don't like the control points that don't work all the time. I don't spend my time, I don't waste my time trying things that I've already tried and I know have failed. I just try to stick to the things that are most consistent. And you can say, well, where's the lack? That's a lack of creativity. I mean, I don't know. I just know that I think I'm pretty creative and I've come to this conclusion. I think I'm very innovative in the way I think about jujitsu. And I've come to this conclusion that, hey, things can only be done certain ways. Certain positions should only be attacked certain ways and just get really, really good at them. It just makes things way easier. Question number 5, why does order matter? Because jujitsu happens on a timeline of events. You cannot just know the correct action. You have to know the correct order. Hand control may need to happen before advancement. Connection needs to happen before pressure. Control needs to happen before an attack. Behavior needs to be generated before the transition appears. If you do the right thing at the wrong time, it becomes the wrong thing. That is why the central path is a timeline. The central path is a timeline of events. Moment by moment, we are making decisions through motion and time. This is why I think we, and this is a little bit off topic, but this is why I think we live in a simulation, because you're programmed to behave and feel certain ways. So if I can manipulate you, or yeah, I guess you could say manipulate you based on how I'm grabbing, how I'm holding, where my pressure is, I am tuning in to that default behavior in your autonomic nervous system. So, not everybody will react that way, but as a natural instinct, the second that a person feels like they're chasing you, they will go back to their default settings and they'll start behaving back in their default way. So long as you keep the pressure on the person, and what I mean by pressure is tempo, rate of decision making. Just keep that tempo, force the opponent to make decisions over and over and over, rapid decision making. um, they'll have to take a break. They have to. It's like their hard drive, it's like their CPU in their brain starts to overheat. They need a second to regulate their breath and to calm their body down. Because of the way that the master plan works and the central paths work, they're all linked. So you're in a constant state of constant pressure. And that starts to wear on the opponent and it starts to psychologically break them as well. Um, So the order matters. The way we do things within that timeline of events matters. Question number 6, why does the central path make you calmer? The reason, and again, I talk about this in timeline of events in the book, page 208. When you begin a sequence and you're the one that's leading the sequence, I do something. Instantly, it's going to put the opponent on the defensive. I do it from the back. I do it when I split. I'm always winning the initial point of contact, not point of contact, but the initial battle. I kind of, the initial grip, I get a good grip, whatever it is. And I start to force the opponent. The opponent feels like they have to react. And when you understand what their reaction is going to be, you've created yourself a buffer. You've created yourself a leading in this timeline. And the longer you're able to hold on to things, the more you're able to understand their reaction. Their initial reaction is this, and then their secondary reaction is that. I am looking at behavior. You have to look at behavior. You have to stop thinking about jujitsu in terms of moves and think of it in terms of behavior. What is the person doing? Where are they turning? Why are they turning? Why are they grabbing here? When you want, what makes him bring his hands up? What makes him base his foot? What makes him base his hand on the ground? Understand how to make these things happen, and you are ahead of the game. You are leading the timeline. So, of course, when I'm leading the timeline, I'm calmer. I have a buffer. I'm looking ahead. So, of course, I'm calmer. I'm not worried about it. But from the perspective of my opponent, it feels like there's a lot of action, a lot of things are happening all at once, and their vision and their mind starts to tunnel, and the panic starts to set in. The reactiveness will set in, and then the panic starts to set in. So it's not just that I'm calm because I've created this buffer, but the opponent's frame rates, the way they see reality in their brain, in their mind, the way that they're experiencing life in that moment is quicker. It's faster. They feel like they're having to be more reactive. They're spiking their energy. So not only am I extra calm, but I am forcing them to be more agitated, more uncomfortable, a constant state of discomfort. So this vast separation in our realities gains a lot of economy for me. This is I try to keep my opponent in this state of mind always. It doesn't change based on what I'm doing. They never get a psychological break. They never get a break to chill, to relax. I know you guys roll and you get the side mount. You guys breathe. No, doesn't work that way here. Even if I'm on the bottom, I understand what movements, I understand what the next best step is, and I immediately go to it. And it immediately starts to create a situation that it makes you feel like I'm slipping away from you. So why does the central path make you calmer? Because you are creating a buffer in time based on your behavior, which generates their behavior. And then that generated behavior is anticipated and you understand what to do once that happens. The reason you're behaving this way is so that they can behave that way. Why does an experienced driver stay calmer than a newer driver? It is because there are fewer cars on the. Is it because it isn't because there are fewer cars on the road? They understand what they're looking at. The central path does the same thing for jujitsu. Hours, years in these positions. I have spent years in these positions, trial and error. What works? What doesn't? Years and years and years. I know what works. I know what positions are failures, and I know which ones are losers and which ones are winners. I know which ones are red zones, and I know which ones are green zones. When you understand the importance of the zones, which are the sub configurations, when you understand where the arm is, where the elbow is, we always fight from the best possible place. We are always fighting from the best possible configuration. Why not? Why do I want to fight from places that I have a disadvantage? I fight from those places to the places where I have the best chance. I might be on the bottom, I might be inside, I might be in mount, but it doesn't mean that I can't get to certain positions that are the best ones from those vulnerable positions. There's always a best place to fight from. And then the central path teaches you what those places are, in my opinion. Question number 7. Why does the game begin to feel slower? Okay, so this is very interesting. For me, for my students, so people who have trained with me, they understand this. Jiu-jitsu feels very slow. Life feels very slow for me. I'm watching things happen in slow motion. I'm watching you turn. I'm watching you base your hand on the ground. I understand the mechanics of where you're going. To me, everybody, no matter how fast they are, is in slow motion. Because in my mind, the frame rates of the sparring session is very slow. Because of this timeline, this buffer that I've created for myself. For my opponents, however, it is not. It is anything but calm. It is constant discomfort. It is constant chasing. It is constantly feeling like you are one step behind or two steps behind. So, in our minds, the frame rates, how we process reality, is slowly and gradually turned up to the opponent, because initially the fresher you are, the quicker you can make decisions. But how long can you withstand that rate of decision making? Decision, adjustment, decision. How long can you keep that rate of decision making up? And I think that is one of the weapons, is the pacing in which we're able to do this. Even though it's slow, it looks slow from the outside. The experience that the person that's sparring against this is feeling is not slow. It is very fast. There's a lot going on there. So, of course, you're thinking ahead. So that slows things down. Again, creating that buffer in the timeline of events. So, of course, we can be behind in the timeline. What happened? Where do I go? What technique was that? How do I fix this? Oh my God, I'm in deep trouble. This is the second you're asking these questions and you're feeling this way, you're behind in the timeline. You're reacting to what the opponent is doing, and it doesn't sound like things are going particularly well. If you're ahead in the timeline, if I do this, what should they do? If they do that, uh, where does it take us? What is my next position? What is my next crucial battle? Where's my next bunker? Understanding where bunkers are. So every time you start getting in trouble, you get to a bunker to recover. A bunker is a place where you can relax for the most part, recover your breath, Maybe not 100% full relaxation, but you can get some regulation breaths to calm your mind and to kind of really clear out the system and re-strategize. Um, there are there are bunkers and there are buoys. The difference between a bunker and a buoy is um, your mindset once you reach it. So a bunker, you're more or less in control. You get there, no problem. A buoy, you are desperate to get there. You're passing the guy's guard. You've been passing for 5 minutes. You're exhausted, and then you pass their guard. You hug their neck. You get the underhook. Oh my god, that's a buoy. So the fact that I was so desperate because it was such a long scramble or long battle, and I finally got to a position where I can rest. The mentality is a buoy. You might need a longer recovery time than a bunker. A bunker, you might only be there for a little bit, and then you move on. How does a central path help you fix your own jujitsu? This may be one of its greatest advantages. Without a plan, when something fails, students often think my side mount isn't good, my passing isn't working, my back control sucks. That's too broad. The central path allows you to ask, where exactly did the sequence break? Did I lose hand control? Did I lose inside control? Did I fail to verify? Did I advance before connection? Did I lose the twisting transition? Did I get behind in the timeline of events? Now the problems become specific. The specific problems can be fixed. So again, if you have a technique, right, that is 10 steps long, there are a few techniques that are generally pretty easy within that 10 steps. Not every technique is a battle. There's some easy ones. And then there are those movements or advancing position or stepping over the knee or trapping the ankle or whatever. There's a few battles within a technique, a sequence of events that are crucial, and you have to know how to win those battles. So if along the way you can do 8 of the 10 steps, but there's a couple of steps within there, a couple of battles that you're having difficulty, we could target and fix how you are fighting those battles to improve those battles. And then once you master the battle, now the sequence flows through easily. So there are certain battles that are more important than others, crucial battles, right? That's why some battles are easier than others. But a lot of what I do from the bottom is I create disruption to the easiest battles. I create disharmony within those battles so that when you go to do those battles, after long scrambles, it makes the scramble even longer. And a lot of times you can give up. Those disruptions in those transitions where we're winning these small battles, but they're not small battles, but they're in the heat of the moment, they seem like they're small battles. The fact that I'm able to create this disruption is a huge advantage for us as well. But when you understand which step in that sequence you're failing at, we can target and fix exactly how that see. But it doesn't mean you throw away the whole sequence. You can just target what you need to work on, and you can fix those things individually. Don't replace the whole system because one step fails. Find the broken step and then fix it. Obviously. Question number 9. Does a central path remove creativity? No, it creates a foundation from which creativity can develop. I said that, I kind of mentioned that earlier. A wrestler learns positions and chain wrestling. Structure comes first, freedom comes later. The central path gives you your default route. As your understanding grows, you begin to recognize low hanging fruit, alternative routes, wormholes, and opportunities, but you always have somewhere to return. This is how I think of jujitsu. It is the core of my game, the core of what should be taught first, because these things work more often than not. And I have so many students that have, come and gone over the years, and they see me years later, and they're like, "Really, the only thing I do, I was a white belt with you," and then they're like, "But now they're black belts because they moved or whatever." And then I see them years later, and they're like, "I still do what you showed me. It still works." So because the things I do work so well, like you can't unsee that. So because things work so incredibly well and they're so effective, you tend to stick with those things because they're reliable and you don't have to worry about new alternatives for that. Now, that being said, with the foundation being laid, you have an understanding of how this reality works, you can become incredibly creative. I tell my students, I have given you guys the central path. It is your job to be creative and expand from it. I gave you primary, secondary, and supplemental. You guys come up with the rest. There's a million moves out there, but your jujitsu lens starts to filter the things that you can go. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. No way that works. Oh, that can work. So you start seeing reality a little bit differently, and then you learn a particular transition or a particular finish, or maybe even a detail that maybe I don't say it, or maybe you haven't heard it from me, or whatever the case, and then you start to piece together those things. But everything stems from the trunk of the central path. That's my goal with my students. And as I'm passing jujitsu on, I'm saying, listen, you guys can do all those things, but are they as effective as the central path? And if you choose to go off the path and do your own thing, always know that you can come back to the central path for your consistency and and your efficiency. Right. Question number 10: why this can save you years of training? I mean, man, if I would have learned this, if I would have learned jujitsu this way, it would have saved me so much time. So much time. It's invaluable. My life's work has been consolidating the information so that you guys, so I can save you guys as much time as possible. I got my black belt in 5.5 years because I was taught a bunch of moves and I was able to figure out how to get them to work quickly. I knew that within a competition mindset framework, there was only a few skill sets that I had to get really good at, and then I can develop the other ones along the way. So there were things that I was learning or I was trying to learn, plug the holes in my game. As the competition got better, I started to recognize where the holes were in my game and plug those holes very quickly. Sometimes I got taught the solutions. The vast majority of the time, I had to come up with my own solution because I didn't have access to a black belt coach all the time. So there was a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of creativity with the guys that I worked with, and then, yes, of course, along the years, you learn things and you add things to it, and then you kind of blend everything together. So I learned jujitsu very, very differently. I learned from both sides of the Gracie family. I think that I have a very unique perspective on top of my own experience with fighting and wrestling, that I've, concocted this formula that I call the master plan. Um, so yeah, it's going to save you guys a lot of time. It's going to save you guys a lot of time. All right, guys. So there's a few more questions here, but there's a couple more questions, not too many more, but please let me know, what do you guys think about this material? What do you guys think of about the central path in general? And what I want to do is I want to get into more specifics, um, like the specifics of each chapter as we're going along. Maybe I was going to do that next week, but I wanted to give you guys kind of like an overall understanding, a big picture understanding of the central path. So that's what this lecture was for. So does anybody have any questions?
Hi.
Anything to say? Yeah, go ahead.
Um, so I noticed myself in training like the last few weeks, really instead of like trying to use techniques, I've been really trying to use this mindset of like um, you know, uh pinning and like knowing what they can and cannot do from said position, like bottom or top side mount and stuff like that. So it's like uh I'm looking at the positions more from like you say, 30,000 foot view versus looking at it as what if he does this, what if he does that, like planning
Yeah.
ahead. I'm more so like trying to learn. I'm trying to make it easier just by like you say, generating behavior and stuff like that. um I do notice sometimes though, like when I'm in on top side mount, I'll pin one limb, like an arm, like one of his arms, one of the arms, the near side or the far side arm. But then they're totally kind of committed to not letting the other arm get pinned. How would we generate behavior to like start getting them to open up in that kind of scenario?
So you're on
You're on
which side are you pinning? The near side arm or the far side arm?
Sometimes I'll pin the far side, and then they'll really tuck their elbow in the near side one, and then I can't get that one, or I'll pin the near side one, and then they'll pin the other one, and they'll be like super adamant about not letting me have the other.
The more you circle towards their heads, the more you circle your knees towards their head, the more likely they're going to turn to turtle. So
Okay.
a lot of times what I'll do to generate the behavior is I'll circle slowly and gradually towards the unattainable angle. And
Uh
then
huh.
as the person feels like you're getting too far north, they'll start to turn their knees.
Okay.
So like you're in side mount here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the legs are on this side and the head is on
Right.
this side. So because the guy's tucking in, I'll do this. I'll kind of circle this way, and then what the guy will do is they'll start to turn.
Right.
So and then I'll just change the turtle.
Right.
Um, that's one thing I'll do. The near side arm, no matter what they do, it's going to get pinned. No
Okay.
matter how they think they're going to stop me from doing that, it's
Yeah.
going to get pinned. Even if the guy is as tight as humanly possible, I'll still get the arm out. No
Right.
problem. So how do you
Okay.
get the arm out is the question.
Yeah. Well, I was very adamant. I guess I could say I was very stubborn about pinning the arms. I didn't really navigate towards the head because taking the back wasn't my goal there. The whole goal was like to get ride time in the position of pinning the arms and then seeing how they buck and thrash around to
Mhm.
see how long the positional threshold would be before I got the submission or before I cooked them, long enough to get a submission.
You know, I understand what you're saying. My goal is always to take their back.
Right.
That's so even they're gonna thrash around, but eventually they're gonna turn. And then what
Yeah.
I'll do is I like to make that turn as hard as possible and then pull their hip and get them to start all over again.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'll make the battle be more. I'll make the battle be about the turn itself rather
Mhm.
than about the pin. Because you're
Right.
saying you're pinning one. If you pin one, they're going to turn that way. They're going to
Mhm.
turn towards that arm. So then it becomes make the turn as hard as possible. And the second they turn the turtle, just bring them right back and then make them start all over again. For
Okay.
me, it's all about controlling this and controlling the build up and then bringing them down. The fact I control this so much is just, it's a matter of time before you exhaust. And the second you exhaust, I got you.
Okay. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I'll make that my focus this week of like of course the overall goal is to get the back, but like I said, I was just trying to get ride time, but I'll be a little bit more open this week to go into the back. Thank you.
No matter what they do, you can get their arms out and pin them. Like it's it's pretty easy. Once you kind of understand how to do it, it's pretty easy. Anybody else? Thanks, John.
Professor,
Yes.
question on passing. So, common sense guard passing, amazing right in that outer rim. And in terms of the sitting position, what advice would you give?
Mm.
I'm trying to low pass more, just as I'm getting a little bit older. Passing on the feet is a little bit tougher.
We can apply.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, to some basically hand control is king. So denying the connection, so not scooting under for leg attacks, denying the butterfly guard, because most people are just going to play butterfly off the seated guard. So, what would you say your highest percentage just to stuff, deny hand connection, and get their back to the mat to start our whole game?
There's a few things that I do from a sit up guard. Sometimes I'll split it and I'll put my knee on their chest and then I lean them back to an unsustainable 45. So rather than the person sitting here, I get them to be here. So then what ends up happening is they fall to one side or the other, or eventually they put their back on the ground. Once their back's on the ground, it's all good. Another thing I'll do is I'll aggressively lift up their feet to get their back to the ground and then I'll split. The third thing I'll do is I'll attack a front headlock, a guillotine, forcing them to their knees so I can just circle to their back. Sometimes I go guillotine and pin their tailbone into the ground and circle behind them. Now I end up in a turtle sitting position. So there's a few things that I'll do
So
that
you
work.
recommend would you recommend then passing more from a standing position then when they're seated?
I think the position that neutralizes that sit-up guard the best is a front headlock. So if
Okay.
you're standing, I'm hammering on their head and getting to a front headlock. And then eventually they're going to go to their knees, and now you're working a front headlock from turtle front. I think that it really disrupts them because they need their head away from you in order for the legs to be effective, to roll, to do all that nonsense that people do from that sit-up guard. Their head has to be away from their feet. So what do you think I do?
Right.
Bring their head to their feet. I force the battle to be about them getting their head up, and now they're glued into the ground. Now I can circle behind them without any sort of difficulty. Or
Okay.
at the very least, they're going to try to sit and face me. Now we're playing that final 45 from side mount top, side mount bottom, or guard top, guard bottom. That
S-
the,
So you would probably I probably don't want to be low passing on those positions because I've
no,
been
not necessary.
no.
Not necessary. I mean, you can. I mean, so you can use your chest. Excuse me, your head on their chest to get them to that unsustainable 45, and then just control their hands or just control their hips. Putting your head on their chest and then leaning them back kills everything.
Okay,
The
perfect.
second thing that kills everything is a lot of times people have the illusion that there is a threat with the butterfly guard. There is not a threat with the butterfly guard. Well, the guy's got a great butterfly guard. The only way that somebody has a great butterfly guard is if their heels separate. So if you can keep the person's heels together by squeezing your knees together, they can't, there's no butterfly guard.
Right.
So because I understand the way the guard works, because I understand because the way these particular kinds of guards work, and I'm really, really good at not letting them work because I understand how to mechanically stop them, the threat is greatly reduced. The fact that the threat is greatly reduced, now it kind of settles the situation, and now we just come back to the central path. And I just
So
generally I
basically
try
if
to
you
low.
okay, so basically if you're in a low passing situation, they come for a butterfly, you're going to squeeze those knees to kill the hooking and then basically hand controls king and circle it out.
Uh, if it's a sit up butterfly situation, I like to put my head right on the center of their chest and
Okay,
lean them back
perfect.
and just wait. I don't try to pass their guard. I put them in the unsustainable 45 and then I wait. And eventually what happens is their back goes to the ground. Their back goes to the ground. I get rid of one of the feet and I immediately pass their guard. Now we're in a half guard passing sequence. So I just went from a butterfly guard to a half guard. Get the
Perfect.
leg across the lap, pass the guard. Common sense guard passing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions? All right. So question number 11 here. Got a couple more minutes, guys, and we'll get you out of here. Um, question number 11. What are we actually trying to program? Because I always talk about programming you. I'm trying to program your default behavior. So if somebody goes to slap you, naturally you back off, naturally you put your hand up, naturally you'll counter. What you don't do is you don't put your face into it. That's not a natural reaction. So your default behavior is that defensive mechanism. Now, we discussed that there's more factual things in the master plan than not. Things that work, that things that are not debatable. There's things in the master plan that they're just not debatable. So there's certain moves that just work every single time. There's certain ways to kill grips that work every single time. There's certain ways that you should react every single time without thinking. It's automatic. You're moving automatically. This is what I call default behavior. This is a subconscious programming that the movement and the techniques that I'm showing you are programming the way you behave at a autonomic nervous system level. You don't know how to do it wrong anymore because the default behavior has been programmed. We do it with things like standing up in base. You used to stand up one way. Hey, this is a more reasonable way to stand up. You do it enough, eventually this is the only way you stand up. You don't do it a different way. When somebody lands in the side mount, I automatically dig the underhook. I automatically clear the arm off the head, one or the other or both. This is automatic. This is because of whatever position I'm in, my default behavior is automatic. It it feels like I'm making decisions faster. So the fact that I'm making decisions faster forces the opponent to have to make decisions faster. And again, how long is it sustainable for him? For me, the decisions I'm making are automatic. I don't have to think about them. They're just like walking. It's like when you're walking and talking on the phone, you don't have to think about the walking portion. It's automatic. So this is what I'm trying to program you with is thinking from every time you land in a particular perspective, you're thinking particular ways, you're asking particular questions, you're behaving particular ways automatically so that you're creating that buffer. So because you're automatically doing the right things, it allows you that buffer in time and you're able to see things. And again, time slows in your mind and you're able to make the best decisions possible more reasonably, more consistently. And again, probability starts to be um, higher because you're winning these battles automatically. What are we trying to program? Default behavior. This is where the central path eventually disappears. In the beginning, you consistently think, hand control, inside control, verify, advance, control the turn, transition. But after enough correct repetitions, you stop saying those things to yourself and your body begins to do them automatically. That is the central path. That is when the central path becomes default behavior. And that is one of the goals of the master plan. We are taking good decisions, repeating them until good decisions no longer require conscious thought. It's a beautiful way to say it. The central path begins as information, then it becomes decision-making framework, eventually it becomes instinct. So those of you guys who have rolled with me and it feels like I just have like a sixth sense, it's automatic. And then I tell you, I can focus on other things. I can focus on your breath. I can focus on your energy. I can focus on where your discomfort. I know where you're I'm able to just kind of get a big picture um, from whatever perspective I'm in. And those are guys that have rolled with me always feel like that. They're like, he just knows. He just knows that like you think you're being super sneaky and bam, I block it. And you're like, how did you know that I was gonna do that? Because I can feel it, I can sense it. Question number 12, why is this different from memorizing techniques? Because technique memorization asks, do I remember the move? The central path asks, do I understand the problem? That is a much more powerful question. If you understand the problem, the objective, the biomechanics, and the next event, you can adapt. Even when the exact technique changes, that is why the master plan is an operating system. So all the notes, are up on the school community, guys. That is all we have for today. Let me know what you guys thought of this in the comments. Let me know if the central path is working for you. Next week, we will start going through the central path in each individual chapter. We'll go into the deep dives through the book. This week, I just wanted to give you guys an overall and the advantages of the central path and the philosophy and thinking of the central path. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you know somebody that would enjoy these lectures, go ahead and shoot them over or let me know. You can DM me, you can send me a message, and I can send you an invite that you can send them and they can become part of our community.
Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. See you guys next week. I'm not 100% on next week because I will be traveling. So I will let you guys know on the Instagram. I might not have one of these next week, but it's just because I'm going out of town and I might not make it back in time on Sunday because I know I'm flying on Sunday. So I'm going to try to do it. I will let you guys know. But thank you guys for joining us and we'll talk to you soon.